Yes. Yeah. Most of you would know us for our big plants. And those are definitely the plants that usually get me most excited. But every now and then I also come across a smaller plant, a plant that doesn't take up all too much space, yet captures my interest. And today I want to show you 10 of my favorite small plants. Hello everybody and welcome back to our YouTube channel, Cuddles, huh? As I mentioned in the intro, today I want to show you some small plants, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I want to show you juvenile plants. I want to show you plants that by design will never get super large. Not all plants are huge, right? I mean, I usually like to grow climbing aeroids that have the potential to grow quite large, but some plants, even when mature, aren't huge space commitments, and those are the ones that I mainly want to focus on today. And then I would like to make a separate video eventually where I talk about plants that have the potential to grow quite large but actually just look better when they're juvenile. The Manjula is a bit of an exception, so let's talk about her last, maybe? Do you have any preference as to where we start off? No? Okay. Why don't we go from over here then? Actually, I want to start off with this one over here because that was one of my latest addition to the collection. And I hope this is all visible and everything focuses on this plant. This is Oxalis molten lava, I believe it was called. And I can put a photo in when I first got it. I have not had it for long. All of these flowers have grown in my care. And see these little bunches of new leaves that are emerging? Over here as well, like these little clusters. Anyway, down here as well, I don't know if you can see this, there's so many teeny tiny leaves coming in, and I think it's just about to explode. It's gonna stay this small, it's never gonna grow as big as my Oxalis triangularis, but I think it just has the cutest pop of color. So I really like it. Now with this plant, obviously really early days still, but I've got this in my plant stand over there that I DIY'd quite close to a light. So despite it being cute and dainty, I'm actually providing it with quite a lot of light, and that should bring that nice purplish color out. Long story short, I love my Oxalis triangularis, and I would even consider that one somewhat of a small plant. So the other day I thought, why am I only growing one kind? And then I found this one online and I thought it had a very different growth pattern. It's more stemmy, you know. So I thought, you know, what's there to lose? And I probably shouldn't touch it so much. But anyway, I'll put it back in its plant stand. I just thought this was such a cute pop of color, especially with the cute little flowers. Oh, by the way, I used the same mix that I use with my normal Oxalis as well. So it's equal parts worm castings, cocoa peat and perlite. So quite water retentive. While we're here, maybe let's look at this plant over here. This one is, I cannot pronounce the genus name, but the species should be something with swainei, whatever. I'll put it on screen. Honestly, I've never actually attempted to pronounce this plant out loud now that I think about it. So there's no version of this plant, name living in my head. So we'll keep it that way. I have had this for probably 4 years, and it's been in this pot for probably 3 years, and it just grows really slowly. And actually, hang on, look, it even self-pollinated over here by the looks of it. Yeah, it grows flowers, by the looks of it they self-pollinate. It just kind of spreads across in the pot, can you see this? And then pops out new flowers over here. It all started as one cutting. I never really actively propagated it. It just does its own thing. Now I've seen these in the botanic gardens over here as well, potted up, and they just have a huge orchid pot with lots and lots and lots of them. So over time, this won't necessarily get bigger. It will just spread horizontally to take up a larger surface area. So it would make a great table display, I think, because it's nice and low. And I really love these silverish leaves. I think it's really cute, and honestly this plant takes up no space and is 4 years old. And because it's so small, it's one of these plants that kind of is a filler to an extent, right? It goes where none of the other plants kind of wants to go, or where none of the other plants fit because they're too big. So in those 4 years that I've grown it, I've had it in various different spots. I've had it in my mother forest at the very top where it gets hardly any light. I had it in my IKEA cabinet. I had it in my greenhouse over summer where it actually got a lot of light. I think it liked that the most, but I don't think it's because of the light. I think it's because of the high humidity. It enjoyed the greenhouse, which makes me think I should probably put that back in the greenhouse now. At the moment, it's actually in my plant stand over there, but at the very bottom. So the Oxalis is at the very top, right under the grow light. This one is kind of at the very bottom and is mainly shaded by all of the leaves above. So this is currently getting very, very little light. Doesn't grow much, but it also hasn't deteriorated much. And I suppose that's why you have a small plant, because you just want it to kind of look cute at all times without really growing too much. Yeah, I don't know. So anyway, I'm really happy with it. And despite the fact that I've grown it for 4 years, I feel like I've made very little experiences with it because there's just nothing to do. Which is hopefully something that you're after if you clicked on this video in the first place. You probably want plants that are small, compact, and low effort. So yeah, can recommend. Next up, and I've got 2 over here, and I've done a full video on Marantas just recently. Maranta is a genus of plants. They're closely related to Caletheas and so on, or Caletheas are closely related to Maranta. They're technically in the Marantaceae family. And while they grow quite fast and lush, the leaves aren't getting much bigger than the ones you see over here. That's kind of how they roll, right? And they would usually crawl along the forest floor, but you can also kind of have them trailing like that. And when they trail and become too large, I just chop them, propagate them in water, and then you can put them back into the pot. But the plant also reshoots by itself from the pot quite frequently. Like you see here, this is the growth point, of course, but then it just shoots out a new one straight from the pot over there. So they're really compact plants, yet they grow. So you have something to look forward to. There's interest. It's not like the plant looks the same all the time, but it's never going to be a huge space commitment, unless of course you just create volume. But of course, with any small plants, once you create volume, obviously it takes up a little bit more space, right? But I feel like with these Marantas, it is easy to make them look really, really good without taking up a lot of space. Even just a small plant like this one over here, I think looks stunning and takes up very little space compared to most of my other plants. And in my latest video that I've done, I've asked everybody in the comment section to, you know, share their experiences with Marantas. And from what I've read is that people all over the world in various different conditions have had great success with Marantas. So I think they're one of the more popular houseplants. They're well known, they're inexpensive and quite readily available. And they seem to be having a good time in various different conditions. I have had the best success with them in my greenhouse, fair enough, but most of them are actually not grown in my greenhouse. And they also like winter. They're also a good plant. Look at this plant, it's quite large. Is all in this tiny pot. So it's a good plant that creates a lot of volume without you needing to use a huge pot that uses a lot of medium that then takes up a lot of space as well and so on, right? So it's great for like a hanging setup where you might not want to hang like a 4 kilo pot from your ceiling or from your wherever you hang it from. So highly, highly recommended, and I think some of the most stunning plants. But I've spoken plenty about Marantas recently, so let's move on. One plant genus that I have not really talked about much are begonias, and that's because I don't grow many begonias. But recently I've had great success with this Begonia rex, and I've also had this for three and a half years or so. So I've had it for a long time, and only recently it became too large and I had to split it. I've never repotted a begonia before and I was quite harsh with it, but it just bounced back like there's like no tomorrow. Quickly addressed is a beautiful begonia. Never really grew for me that well until I put it in my light stand over there, and it outgrew its pot so quickly in that stand that I'm trying to maybe separate it out. I want to put it back there because it looked so good and it obviously loved that spot, but it is so root bound by now that I have to water this plant every day, right? Because there's just no more substrate to really retain all of the moisture, and there's just so much plant supported by that little pot. So that's why I want to kind of separate her out. Let's see if I can just conveniently split this. I know they're going to have a hard time being split, but I think I'm just going to... I don't know how to do this. I've never repotted a begonia. I don't really grow begonia, so I'm not too sure how rough I can be. Judging by the really fine roots, I don't think I should be too rough, but how can I possibly not be rough if I need to split the whole pot? Should I just split it, like, and rip it? Okay. I suppose we'll find out if that was too rough or not. I really enjoy this. I think it's such a nice, lush, compact display. Again, I think great for a coffee table, for a dining table, because it's not growing too large. It's not obstructing anything, right? And if you grow it in lower light conditions, this specific Rex variety also seems to really have a bluish sheen. You probably can't see this with my filming light on, but they almost have a bluish sheen to them, grown in lower light. I have a separate one in this grow light stand over there that doesn't have the bluish sheen because it gets a lot of light. It also flowers nicely, and it has the same water retentive mix as the Oxalis, so equal parts cocoa peat, worm castings and perlite. I have a problem finding a plant that can go into such a shallow planter while still being nice, and I found this and I think it kind of works. So maybe I'll try a few other begonia varieties. Now obviously this is a huge generalization over here. Of course there's begonias that grow larger leaves. I actually have one in my greenhouse that grows quite large leaves, which I don't like as much. But I think most of the Rex varieties should grow quite small leash leaves. And it's a genus that has a lot of variety in it, right? There's so many Begonia Rex varieties in all sorts of colors and so on. So I think it's definitely something where you could have a large collection, but each plant is somewhat small and it still looks good, if you know what I mean. Not like Hoyas. But yeah, I really enjoy this plant, and it's kind of super unexpected, right? It was one of these plants that's quite inexpensive when I bought it from Bunnings, and never really had great hopes for it. I just thought, oh, I've never grown a begonia, why don't I just pick one up? It's right there. And yeah, I felt really indifferent about it for the first two and a half years, and only recently, once it started growing a little bit better for me, I started paying attention to it, and I have to say I like what I see. Alrighty, now this is more something that you'd probably expect of me. This is my Monstera obliqua. Now I have had this plant for 2 years now, and it started off as a tiny tissue culture, and by now I have probably 25 plants on here or something like that. I mean, there's one here, 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 one here. Look at all of these tiny plants that I've got down there, like this one. Like, look at all of these. Oh my god, I can't even show you because it's too close. Oh, look at all of these tiny plants in here. And then obviously some have larger leaves as well, but and then like new leaves are coming out here, so cute. And new leaf coming out here and here. Ah, so cute. So there's lots and lots of plants on here, and I suppose that's how I managed to keep it so compact. With obliqua, what happens is it commonly sends out runners, like this one over here, that just kind of wants to run away from its moss pole or its growth. What I do with these runners, once they reach the top of the moss pole, the runner has rooted into the moss pole, I just chop between every node of the runner and then they all reshoot. So if I have a runner and I chop it in 5 bits, then I now have 5 little plants on there that all will reshoot. And I've continuously done that, right? Some of these shoots might send out a runner again, I chop it again and so on. And that's how I ended with so many plants on here. And even if not all plants survive, I have plenty on here. And I think that makes more sense with a plant like this. I think these leaves are pretty big for an obliqua as it is. And I don't even think they're that nice. I much prefer these sort of leaves here, you know. And because this plant likes to send out runners so frequently, I think it is not very likely for you to have a lot of large leaves in progression without the plant eventually wanting to just run away. So I think the chopping is inevitable with this plant unless you love this super leggy look. And chopping always sets back your plant. So in itself, it might not be the smallest plant compared to what we've seen before. But due to the frequent chopping that is required because of the runners, it's kind of, as a display, always kept somewhat juvenile. I think this is coming up to 2 years on this pole now, like in December or January, it would be 2 years. So 2 years on this one moss pole. Very little effort. Very cute, can fit so easily anywhere. Most of it is also vertically stacked, so it really doesn't take up that much space. Was able to fit into the IKEA cabinet for the longest time until some of these leaves gotten a bit too big. But honestly, I could even chop these 3 leaves off, for example. Get rid of the bigger ones and it would be even smaller. But I mean, I don't want to. I mean, I like them. But yeah, and we're just coming out of winter as well. Right now I'm just growing it in a south-facing window, so it doesn't get a whole lot of light. Keep in mind I'm in the southern hemisphere, so it's the equivalent of a north-facing window in the northern hemisphere. Ambient room conditions, so nothing crazy on the humidity front. Like, it's definitely not as finicky as I initially expected. It grows quite slowly, which isn't a bad thing when we're talking about small plants. So yeah, I think this is a great small compact plant. Yet you're still growing up a moss pole and you're growing lots of it and so on. So I really like this. Let's stay on the Monsteras then. This one is Monstera siltepecana. Now these are just propagations from a moss pole that I cut up. So normally this plant would love to climb, and when you let it climb the leaves can get a little bit larger, but compared to other Monsteras, it actually stays quite compact. And I just put in my mother plant via B-roll on the side. So even if you grow it vertically, it is not going to be a really large plant. I suppose it's only as large as the pole you give it. But it isn't going to grow large leaves with super long petioles that reach in all directions. So it's quite compact, whether you grow it as a climber or as a trailer. But I think trailing looks so good, especially if you manage to have lots and lots and lots of them in here. So it also survived all of winter outside, so it's very, very hardy. I just think it looks so cute, and if you love common pothos and you love having a common pothos trailing, I think this one is giving similar vibes, but it's a little bit different, a little bit more interesting, or like just different, right? And it does have these little silver bits on it as well, which I think is really cute. And then the contrast between the darker old leaves and then the fresh lime greeny new leaves. I just think this looks so cool. And it's actually one of my very first plants that I've ever had. And I never really appreciated a plant until I started growing it as a trailing plant. Who am I? Huh? Who am I and what have they done with Sydney Plant Guy? Let's stay on trailing plants then. Scindapsus. And we have 2 Scindapsus in this list actually, and I'll show you a third one in a sec as well. This one is, I believe, Silvery Ann. Scindapsus is a very confusing genus to me as well. But I've also had this for 4 years or so. I haven't repotted it in 3 years. All I do is I just keep trailing the plant back around into the pot. It is actually in quite a low light environment for me, so I can take these and trail it back up again. If I don't want this trailing, for example, you know, I just take it and we put it up here. Done. Compact. It is on top of my IKEA cabinet. I don't know, I think it's just out of frame, but on top of the IKEA cabinet there is not much light. That's probably why it's also encouraged to trail, because there's more light down there. But it does not mind the low light conditions, which is something that's always good for us indoor growers, because light is a big issue and we always want to, and it's always nice to have a plant even in a darkish corner. And I suppose that also helps it stay somewhat juvenile. I mean, I have had some larger leaves like these ones over here, but majority of the leaves are quite cute and small. So again, the plant in itself is quite small, but of course if you have a lot of volume, like by now I have so many vines in here twisted around over and over again, eventually you can become somewhat large, but you can also just chop it back, right? Each leaf and each petiole and so on will definitely not be a space commitment. Let me show you a larger one. And this one over here gets much more light. This one is Argyraeus, so stunning. I've had this for 4 years, I think, not repotted in 3 years. I do nothing with it apart from just, again, twisting all of the plants back to the top. Can you see this mess up there? It's actually quite heavy, so much plant in here. Now this plant gets plenty of light from a grow light, and that's why it grows a lot more. I have a lot more of it, but each leaf is not that much bigger, right? So it just creates volume and it's really nice and lush, but it does not hoard a lot of space. Now, one of the reasons why they're not maturing is because I'm not growing them in line with their natural growth pattern. In nature, they would climb up trees, and that climbing nature would then trigger to the plant to go ahead and mature. Over here, however, I have a Scindapsus that I am growing as a climber, and I've just recently chopped it, so I should have really recorded this video 2 weeks ago, but that's okay. That's why there's a little bit of a downgrade in leaf size, because I chopped it significantly and it's actually reverting a little bit, but not to be concerned. But let's have a look at these leaves over here. They are quite mature, and I think this is as large as they will get within my indoor setting when it comes to maturity. So they're definitely larger than the ones that I had trailing, despite the fact that this one is a variegated version, so technically less chlorophyll, should have less potential to mature. But the reason this one is maturing more is because I'm growing it as a climber. But because I'm growing it as a climber, I can't do the same thing and just twisting it around and around and around. I like this neat shingling. So basically, by the time it reaches the top, I cut the pole in half, pot up the top, re-extend it. So this is the top of the previous one. And then I have the bottom in the greenhouse, and that wasn't even the first time. I've done that twice already, and I've had the plant just over a year, right? So the plant outgrows the support quite quickly, which means that I frequently chop the plant. And because I frequently chop the plant is constantly kind of set back a little bit. So it won't really mature much further than this, I believe. In nature, when they climb up a tree, they don't mature that much faster or get that much bigger, I believe, from what I've seen on Google. But it would probably take like 2, 3, 4 meters until the plant really maxes out in maturity. We don't have 2, 3, 4 meters in our indoor setting. So we have to continuously cut up the plant, start again, you know, propagate and so on. So purely based on that, the plant is kind of constantly held in check. It's kind of like constantly bonsai'd based on chop and extend processes. And I really, really like this. And because it's shingling in nature as well, it has no depth to it. Like, what do you know? Like, this is horizontal spread, vertical spread. What is this spread? Horizontal but different dimension, if you know what I mean. Sometimes, like this one, for example, have a look. They're on the same pole from your end. Pole looks the same, but when I turn them around, like this one, like for an IKEA cabinet, for example, I need to account the depth of the plant, right? The door is going to slam into these leaves and going to ruin them. I do not have this issue with this plant, so this is a perfect candidate for my IKEA cabinet. And you don't even need to grow it on a moss pole or in an IKEA cabinet. You can literally let it shingle up your wall. It will actually even reduce the chances of it maturing even further. So, and it looks stunning. Also done a recent video on this plant, so I'm sure you're all sick of hearing me talk about it. Alrighty, and then this one over here, and I think it's the second last. I have one more outside that I want to show you. This is my Manjula pothos. Now, I think this is a bit of an exception to all the other ones, because Manjula pothos can technically grow quite mature. And I have one over there. I'll just put it in via B-roll, because it's kind of in a corner that's hard to get to. But Manjula pothos grows very, very slowly and needs quite a lot of light due to the high variegation to actually mature. So I've grown it to maturity once, and then with chop and extend it had some setbacks, and I'm actually struggling to get it back to its former size. So even though I've grown it quite mature once, I'm now struggling to replicate that myself. So bottom line is, unless you're really trying to mature this plant, and always give it the best spot with light, when it comes to light and so on, I don't think you have to worry about this growing all too big at any time. It also grows quite slowly, so again, you don't have to worry about it growing too big anytime soon. I think this plant on this pole and specifically must be like 2 years old now, I think. And all I do with it is I trail it up and then I trail it back down, and then it reaches the bottom of the pot and then it trails back up again. So I'm just going up and down to achieve this really lush look. And again, it's a plant that has, the petioles are relatively small, the leaves are relatively small. It's just somewhat compact, right? Like the pole and the pot are like almost one dimension, one depth. It's not like I have a petiole going here and a petiole going there and I need to, you know, choose between, am I going to have a dining table or this plant? This plant somewhat neatly fits into any corner, and because I'm now growing it 360 degrees around it, I can also rotate it and so on. Like, it just doesn't take up that much space. That's the end of the story. And because I'm not aiming for maturity, I don't need to give it the brightest spot. I'm happy to give it a spot that has less light. It's just a filler plant again, right? It's one of those that, okay, if there's a spot available there, then that's where it's going to go. Whether or not this is enough light for the plant to thrive is kind of irrelevant, because I don't even want the plant to thrive to its full potential. So yeah, that's kind of what I meant with, you know, even if you optimize the Maranta's conditions, for example, it's never going to mature to have huge leaves like that, right? If you give this optimal conditions, yes, it could actually mature. So in that sense, it's a little bit different to the other plants, but I really enjoyed the compact nature of it, even when it grows slightly larger leaves. So I wanted to include it. I basically wanted to have another plant on a moss pole, okay? Okay, one more, I need to bring it in from the outside. Alrighty, very different to what you're probably used to from me. This is my Bromeliad display, and I have done a specific video on this before actually, but I don't talk about it very often. I put in a little photo of what it started off like, and that was 2 years ago. And then you can see, this is, for example, one of the original Bromeliads. It has now shot out here, and here. Look at all of these. And now I have all of these little fireworks everywhere, right? How cute. Same over here. Original Bromeliad has grown bromeliads off this, and they're now even growing their own bromeliads off of that again. So eventually I'll probably have to chop here because it's going to become too leggy, right? Or even pin them back to the pole like that. I'll probably end up doing that. Not today though. Again here, look at all of these new bromeliads coming out. And I even have a little orchid at the top. All of this was mounted to a piece of tree fern fiber that I found on the street. So yeah, I've had this display as it is, hanging in my garden for 2 years. Requires very little maintenance. When I water my garden, I just spray this as well. Happy days, but most of the time watering is done by Mother Nature. So very little effort. It can handle a lot of sun if you want to sun stress them a little bit, but it can also grow in a more shady, it can also grow in shadier conditions. Grows outdoors year round, cold tolerant, nice pop of color, very different. I just find it quite interesting and very different to what I normally grow, but it is actually just no effort, like 0 effort. And it's somewhat compact, right? I mean, of course, if they keep growing outwards, not so compact, but I could also just pin it back on here, as I mentioned before, and then it would be quite compact, right? So it is up to me to decide whether or not I want this to be compact. The plants in themselves are quite compact. And of course, you also don't need to have 6 different bromeliads on a big tree. You could just have one. But I think they're really cute, and I really like them, and I wanted to include them because I think that's the whole theme of today's video, like small plants that are kind of out of the ordinary for me, let's say, minus the ones on the moss pole. That was kind of expected. Anyway, I'll wrap it up here. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you want me to make that video about plants that could mature but look much better juvenile, because I have a few ideas. And to be honest, I'll probably do that video even if you tell me not to do it. Actually, especially if you tell me not to do it, I most likely am going to do it. Anyway, I should really stop talking. In the comments down below, let me know what is a small plant that you like to grow. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Bye.